Up next on Inside the SCCA, our Watkins Glen Super Tour preview. Welcome to Inside the SCCA. I'm Brian Bielanski. Episode 166 up this evening. We are really excited to have with us Russ Turner, last year's FE2 national champion. Welcome to the show, Russ.
Good evening, Brian. How are you?
I'm doing great. Glad to have you here. And you are coming to us live from, of course, where you should be, a racetrack. You're up at
That's right.
Up at Watkins Glen already, ready to get ready. Is there a test day tomorrow?
Yep, that's correct. A test day tomorrow, and then practice and qual Friday, and race Saturday and Sunday.
So you got a lot ahead of you this weekend, and it should be a pretty good weekend up there. Weather, how's the weather look?
Right now, the weather's looking fabulous.
Good.
So it's going to be a little chilly tomorrow, but the rest of the weekend's going to be really, really nice.
Good.
Slight chance of rain on Sunday, but I think that's going to hold off. We'll be good.
Weather's fabulous because I'm not going to this one. That's typically how this works. So you'll be in good shape. So I start every episode with the same question, Russ. I'm not sure if you've had a chance to watch very many, but the question I ask is pretty simple. How did you get mixed up in this crazy sport that we love?
Well, you can blame two people, my younger brother, Jamie, and Denny Stripling. So my younger brother, just digging around on YouTube one day, finds a video of Denny racing at VIR with about, 200 lead changes. And we sat and we watched that video, and then we watched it again and again. And we were entertained by it quite a lot. And so I said to myself, if I ever decide I want to go racing, that's exactly the cars that I want to drive. It's the kind of racing that I want to do. And the opportunity arose, not long after we saw that video. And so I saw Denny was advertising Southeast SPEC Racer on the video. I called them up, asked them, what do I need to do to go racing? And they gave me you need a license and then you need a car. And so I did a little research and figured out what I need to do to get my license. And so I dug a little bit deeper, and I decided, well, if I'm going to get a license, maybe I should find somebody that does a license in spec racers. So I found Todd Harris's school out in Portland. So me and my brother jumped on a plane, went to Portland, spent a week out there, did Todd Harris's school. It gave us quite a bit of an advantage because Todd not only taught us what we needed to know to get a license, but he also taught us the inside and outs of the spec racer on how to properly drive a spec racer. Once he figured out we were there to learn to drive spec racers, as much as we were there to get a license, I think that changed their approach a little bit. And so we left there, with a pretty big advantage of being newcomers to the class. That gave us a pretty good head start. And then I hired Denny as my coach, and that was 2017. And so I've just built on it since then.
Yeah. So were you a car guy before all of this, or just what was your car background?
So I've always been a car guy ever since I was a kid. Cars are my job, and been my life, my entire life. I hadn't done any formal racing before that, other than I did a little bit of flat track motorcycle when I was a kid. Wasn't very good at it, but that's the extent of my racing career. But been around cars my entire life. Always worked on cars. Ran a drag race program for a few years back in the Sport Compact days, and we did quite well at that also. But I'd never driven myself,
Sure.
other than working on cars. Once I'd gotten to a point in my life where I felt like it's time for me to go do the driving myself and see how good I can be at it.
So when you chose your school, there aren't very many schools out there that specialize or the school car is a spec racer. Most of them are, Like the Bondurant school's got the open wheel cars, and then it's got the Mustangs, I think now. How did you locate a school that did Spec Racer Ford? Did you just Google Spec Racer Ford Racing School?
Yeah, that's exactly what I did. And Todd Harris's school, Pro Drive,
Right.
was the only one that I could find. But I didn't really look much further than that. Once I saw his credentials, saw the school, I looked at how it was kind of laid out, and I was like, oh, this ought to be perfect for us. Don't mind jumping on a plane, and even though it is all the way across the country, it didn't matter to us, So it worked out quite well, and the timing was perfect because it went from the time me making my first contact with Denny and doing the school and doing my first race all happened over a period of about 6 weeks.
Wow.
So it was, I just happened to look around and I found the Pro Drive school, and they had a school coming up. And so I checked with them. They had spots available, and by the time I got my gear and got out there, it happened all very quickly.
So are you one of the 3 fast guys in a Denny? I can never figure out which are the 3 fast guys, because Denny's pretty fast himself.
Well, obviously that's the joke of the name, is that it's 3 fast guys and another really, really fast guy named Denny.
Yeah.
We never implied that Denny was slow.
Right.
So, and the name gets a lot of traction in the racing that we do.
Sure.
A lot of people, when they first hear it, they get a good kick out of it. And Denny is a great sport, taking the lead on the name there.
Yeah.
We thought about changing it up, every race, like, whoever the fastest person was for the weekend, we would change the name to, 3 fast guys and whoever the fastest guy was. But then we figured we'd be in endurance racing. You don't really want to be chasing the time like that.
Right.
And so we figured that would give us a little too much incentive to push the car hard. And one of the advantages that we have in the endurance racing that we do is that not only are we fast drivers, but we're very, very good with the equipment. We're clean, and we can run really, really consistent paces, and so that gives us a huge advantage in that type of racing. And so we didn't want to take a chance of risking that. We want to win as a team, and so we just left it at 3 fast guys and Denny.
Well, there's also the psychological advantage of that. If the 3 fast guys all drive, and then Denny gets in, everyone else can, well, okay, the 3 fast guys are done. Now we got Denny. And then they realized very quickly
that actually
doesn't
happened at our first race. Yeah, so we had a team next to us who was actually in our class, and they kept looking at the times, and finally they came.
Uh-oh. We locked you up there. Well, if you can hear me, take a second here. I lost you, Russ. All right, so we're going to pause for a second. Not pause, but we're just going to tap dance here for a second. I think we will get Russ to pop back in here. As soon as he does, we'll get him on. This is the wonderful technology of the world. Always dependent on lots of different things going on. Hopefully it's not something big like his cell phone lost a battery or something. He is at Watkins Glen, and sometimes the internet at the racetrack isn't so awesome. We will see what happens here. Hopefully he'll pop in real quick. Oh, here he comes. Stand by. We'll get him dialed in here pretty quick. There you are.
Okay. Gotta love technology.
Yeah, technology is great, isn't it?
Yeah, right up to the point it doesn't work.
Oh, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. So we were talking about you were telling a story about how you had a endurance race and the team next to you was in your class.
Yeah, it happened to be this was our very first race as three fast guys in Denny, and we were pitted right next to our main competitor in the class, and they do the same thing we do, where we're looking at the drivers and we're trying to figure out who the fast ones are, and calculating the times, and so they came over and asked when Denny was getting in the car, and we told them Denny had already been in the car, and so they quickly realized that they didn't and up until that point they didn't realize the joke of the name until
Right.
that point, and so they got a good kick out of it at the podium celebration afterwards. They claimed that was false advertising. So, but they were good sports about it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So you said you went to school and then you looked up Denny for him to be your coach. So what's it like when you tell a guy that, well, we saw you in a race and you made me want to go racing so much that I went out to Portland to go to a school and now I want you to be my coach?
Yeah, that was one of Denny's. That's kind of one of the things that he does.
Right.
He does a lot of coaching, and he's a very, very good coach. But I could tell immediately watching some of the videos. Started looking at other spec racer videos, and I could tell immediately that the skill level in this class was was very high.
Right.
Especially after I drove the car the first time, I realized that there was a lot of technique and stuff there missing that I need to learn quickly if I want to be competitive in it. And so I knew I needed a coach immediately. There was just no way I was going to climb to the top of a class like this without some serious help. And so I hired Denny as a coach, and that was 2017. We did quite a few races that year. That was the year of Indy,
Right.
the first year of Indy, and you could run a Gen 2 and a Gen 3 at the runoffs that year, and so that gave me I wanted to qualify for both, and so that gave me extra races to do,
Mm-hmm.
and the Gen 2 being uh, not a lot different than the Gen 3 in terms of handling. It didn't hurt me at all. In fact, it helped me a lot because the Gen 2 car was even more of a momentum car than the Gen 3 is. And obviously, if you learn how to drive a car like that, that carries over to even more powerful and faster cars. So we did a lot of racing that year. And Denny did a lot of coaching, and it paid off. As you could tell, I got there relatively quick.
Yeah. Spec Racer Ford and all of our spec classes, honestly, some drivers take years to get to the pointy end of the field. And if you started in 2017 and, last year you won a national championship in FE2 and you were right up front in Spec Racer Ford 3 at the runoffs as well, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I'm proud of that. But it didn't come without a lot of hard work,
Sure.
a lot of dedication, and I had a lot to learn. So I had to do my homework. Um, I did lots of laps. I rented tracks. I did club days, and obviously I did every test day. I turned a wheel in every session. Never missed a session, and that's what it took to get there. And honestly, it takes a little bit of that to stay there.
Yeah.
So this class is, both the classes, all the spec classes for that matter, they're so competitive that you can't give up anything, and so you have to constantly work at making the car faster, making yourself faster, because goes out there and they find a little bit of speed, and then that forces you to go find it. And then when you find it, everybody else finds it. And so, it's just a constant ladder climbing of looking for that little bit of edge.
What do you like most? Let's start with FE. Let's start with Spec Racer Ford. What do you like most about that class, since that's the one you started in, and I'm guessing you've got the most time in that?
Yeah, I have substantially more time in the Spec Racer than I do in the FE. Um, the Spec Racer class is it's a racer's class. So it's if you like to race and you like the thrill of strategy, of setting people up for passing, close racing, constant competition. That's one of the classes that give you a substantial amount of that. There's no shortage of tight racing in that. So whereas the FE2, uh, the racing is just as tight, but not as deep. So the fields are not quite as large.
Right.
The front pack is a little bit smaller, but the FE2 is a driver's car. So if you like to drive, the FE2 is a fabulous car to drive. It's one of the cars that if I want to go out and just make laps, I would drive the FE2.
Sure.
If I want to go out and race, I drive the Spec Racer.
Yeah.
That's how I always tell people when they ask me about the two. Is one of them I like more to race, one of them I like more to just drive. The FE2 is a car that even as much time as I have in it now, every time I go out and I drive the thing, I come back just amazed at how fast the car is for what little bit of car that really is.
Right.
It's a substantially fast car for its specs.
And so, and now you get to drive both pretty much every weekend, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. There are times where when they're back to back on the schedule, sometimes I'll have to miss a session. I generally never don't do both, but there are definitely times where if it's really hot and it's a back-to-back sessions and maybe it's practice or something like that, sometimes I'll skip a session, but I'll never miss the races or the qualifying.
Right.
Last year at this race, we were back-to-back, and it was a little bit warm last year, and so it was physically it was a challenge last year to do the back-to-back race, especially both races were very well contested, so that adds some more, physicality to it because you're on edge the whole time and you can't relax.
Right.
And so when you get out of the Spec Racer after going, wheel to wheel for 25 minutes and then have to jump in the FE where going wheel to wheel is a little more nerve wracking.
Right.
And requires a lot more concentration to make sure you don't make a mistake. It's a lot of work.
Well, and I've always thought, and you don't have this luxury because you're usually running up front in both classes. But if you're in your first class and you're halfway past, you're past halfway, and maybe you're in 10th or 12th or whatever, you could just call it halfway, call it a day. You get your points, you get your finish, pull in, and then you have a nice leisurely 5 minutes to get ready for your next race. But you don't typically have that luxury because you're usually running for a podium in both.
Yeah, that's I don't remember having had that opportunity since I started running the FE2, but I would definitely take advantage of it if I had, if something happens,
Right.
maybe I spin or
Sure.
something in the first class and so a win is out of reach,
Right.
I probably would take the opportunity to just come in a couple laps early and go get ready for the next class, especially to clear my head and
Sure.
and get in the right frame of mind to because these classes are not just physically demanding; they're mentally demanding
Right.
too. It takes a lot of it's not just physical skill you need. The competitiveness is so stout that you have to use every tool that you have, and that includes you know trying to find ways to make your competitors make mistakes.
Right.
And so it requires you to be perfectly in tune with the car and the track, and so that you can go out and put the pressure on the other competitors. That's one of the things that I like to do is I like to go fast early and try to make my competitors make a mistake. I prefer to lead over anything else, because I think that when I don't have another car in front of me, I don't have to worry about that, and that allows me a little extra concentration to to try to be faster and put more pressure on them.
Right. Is the Spec Racer Ford more mentally challenging because you're essentially have someone either on your tailpipe the whole race, or you're right on someone else's tailpipe the whole race because of the importance of the draft, rather than FE2 where you've got equal cars, but the draft isn't such a big deal for FE2?
I would say it's close.
Okay.
The difference is, yes, where the FE2 requires a little more mental concentration because it's a faster car, and wheel-to-wheel contact has a lot more, risk of something going wrong.
Right.
But you're right. The Spec Racer, you're running so close, and everybody is so competitive that you cannot afford to make a mistake. Sometimes if you make a mistake, sometimes the gap that you leave can never be bridged.
Right.
And so you can't run the risk of making a big mistake.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's close between the two. It's probably a little bit more when it's really really tight in the Spec Racer class. It's probably a little more mentally challenging than the FE2, but they're really close.
We've got basically 4 spec classes. Well, 5 with B-Spec, I guess. But the Miatas tend to have a lot more of the younger up-and-comer drivers than the Spec Racer Ford or the FE2. And the drivers in Spec Racer Ford especially tend to stay with that class for a long time. You've got a couple of new drivers showing up these days. You've got Caleb Schrader, you've got Morgan Burkhart. What's it like for all y'all old guys who've been there forever to now have some of these young bucks coming up and challenging at these races?
Well, we have more than a couple. If you've been watching, you also have you got Richard Stevens' son Tyler. You've got Leon Flanagan,
right?
Who runs out of the same area with Tyler. So there's more than just a couple coming along, and it's as an older, established person in this class, it's a little intimidating because it's going to, if I'm going to stay competitive, it means I'm going to have to work harder.
Right.
The class never gets to the point where you can rest.
Right.
And so, these kids are going to come along and they're going to find ways to make the car do things that we couldn't make it do. And so it's going to force us to have to go find these things that they find.
Right.
Whenever new people come to the class, especially when they're young and, kind of fearless, they tend to try things that we wouldn't try.
Right.
And whether they do it intentionally or unintentionally, but they will find ways to make the car faster, and that forces us to have to do the same thing. So it's going to be fun because I actually kind of enjoy running with the younger kids because it gives me a little bit of extra strategy to use.
Sure.
I can do things like show them a nose in places that you wouldn't normally, pretend like you're going to pass them, things like that, that doesn't work on any of the front guys that normally race. Those types of strategies, they're just going to ignore you, so it doesn't really work anymore. So I'm kind of looking forward to it. Maybe I can use some strategy to win some races. But it's going to be tough. And these kids are already up to speed.
Yeah.
The new sequential transmission is drawing in those younger kids now, and I think it's going to be the class is going to pack up in the front. There's going to be a lot of front pack. The front pack's going to get heavy with these kids, and it's going to make some interesting racing.
I think we've had a lot of discussions on the podcast about, getting younger people involved in what we do. And, there are other places for young drivers who might have aspirations of going to a higher level to go to with cars that are maybe a little more relevant to the next level. And the sequential gearbox in and Spec Racer Ford has really made that car more consequential, more relevant, because it transfers that knowledge transfers up to another class, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's, I was really sad to see the H pattern go, mainly because I had worked so hard at my footwork. Denny is a absolute master at footwork, and
Right.
so he has videos of his feet, and so I spent a lot of time trying to match that, and so uh, it really kind of burned me a little bit to see the H pattern go. But now that it's gone, I don't miss the days of having to change transmissions.
Yep.
I can tell you that. It has definitely changed the class. It's going to bring in the younger people. I think it's also going to be more appealing to overall to everybody.
Right.
Because it is a sequential car now. The car is quite a bit faster, and it is so much fun. The faster the car goes, the more fun it is, and
Sure.
so I've been converted. I'm a fan of the SADEV now. So
What do you have aspirations to go to a different class, or have you found your classes, or have you found your home and you like where you're at?
I like where I'm at.
Yeah.
Everything that I don't get in the Spec Racer, I get in the FE2 and vice versa. So they're very good complementary classes. If you don't like the speed of the Spec Racer, then get in the FE. Because it's a car that you can drive it as hard as you want to drive it, and it just goes faster. And so if you want raciness and you like pack racing and drafting, and you got the Spec Racer. If you like playing with the aero and figuring out, playing with your wide range of setup options, then the FE2 is the car for you.
Right.
And when it comes to reliability, I mean these cars they're phenomenally reliable. And so I spend very very little amount of time working on my cars these days. They're uh, they're holding up very well. The SADEV has really changed the Spec Racer in terms of reliability, and so there has been a few new weaknesses exposed, but they're very minor, and compared to breaking a transmission.
Sure.
Um, so yeah, I like where I'm at. I'm definitely not looking to go anywhere else. Any of the other stuff that I dabble in, like the endurance racing and things like that's more than enough fill for me to stop me from wanting to spend much more time doing anything else.
Yeah, that is one of the joys of the spec classes, especially the SCCA spec classes. When we had the Sports Renault, that just shows you how old I am. My dad ran 29 weekends on a transmission and an engine, and he won on weekend 2 and won on weekend 29. So they didn't lose a lot over that time. If you changed the oil, you changed the brake pads, you made sure everything was up to tip top shape. You cleaned out your radiator after every session, because running them hot a couple of times was no bueno. But as long
Right.
as you did all that, these things were pretty bulletproof, and they seem to still be pretty much that way.
They absolutely are. There's very few things that you need to check in between sessions. The engines have been superb. I mean, for what we put them through and the way we abuse them, it's astounding that they last as long as they do. And not only do they last that long, they continue to make good power for really really long amounts of time. So you're not really, when you find some classes you have to chase motors around.
Right.
You don't have to do that in these classes, and so it's nice. It's nice. I'm not. I don't mind spending money to race. I just don't want to have to spend my way to the front, and
Right.
both of these classes prevent you from doing that. So
Right. All right, let's talk about Watkins Glen here. Give me a second to go through and thank the people who helped me put this podcast on. Racekeeper is the official in-car camera of Inside the SCCA. You can find out all about their products going to our show notes. The links are there. Their Roadkeeper is a really cool product. Ray Esports is the official esports sim racing league of Inside the SCCA. Love racing with Ray and his leagues. I like those leagues because most of the drivers have some SCCA background and they treat sim racing almost like they're on the racetrack, so we don't take each other out very often. And that is one of my pet peeves of iRacing in general. But when you go on the Ray Esports leagues, that's often not the case. Every once in a while, people get a little nutty, but we have a good time. And then, of course, Solo Performance Specialties. These folks are at all of the, or most of the National Tour races, and, of course, at the Solo Nationals. Dave and his crew, awesome people, and we love having them on board. So if you need anything for your solo car, and they have a whole bunch of products that they sell, and they do it online as well. So you don't have to be at the Autocross to find them. You can order from them online. So all of that information is in the show notes below. So scroll down there and click on them and check all those folks out. All right, Watkins Glen this weekend. This is round, 17 and 18 of the Super Tour. Our second to last weekend. It's hard to believe it's almost June 1st, and we're at the second to last Super Tour this weekend. What are you expecting out of Watkins Glen this weekend?
In the Speed Racer class, I expect more of what we had last year. I'm fortunate enough to have Denny as my teammate. This is a track that, with a good teammate, you can work together. You can keep yourselves up front. And so I expect that Bobby and probably Morgan and Justin Claudery, and Jim Goffrey, those guys are going to be probably doing their best to keep me and Denny away from each other. I expect that from them, especially after last year. The Saturday race last year was a me and Denny got away on the first lap, and we were able to just steadily drive off. The Sunday race last year, Bobby and Sandy prevented us from a repeat of Saturday.
Right.
Good on them, because we were definitely prepared to do it, and we had a fabulous team battle between me and Denny and Sandy and Bobby last year that actually had me giggling the entire race. I was like, these guys definitely learned their lesson yesterday, and they're not letting us do what we did.
Yeah.
So I expect more of that. Me and Denny are gonna try to do what we do. We're gonna try to work together, try to stay up front, try to keep the fast people separated from the other fast people, and it's a strategy game here, and I just hope similar results to what I had last year.
Yeah, last year my teen was graduating from high school, so the Glen was the one race last year I didn't get a chance to broadcast. And typically when that happens, Greg and I talk afterwards, and the only thing Greg sent me was on Sunday night was watch the two SPEC Racer Ford races. They were awesome. So I actually scrolled back through on Monday morning and took a peek at all of those. So very cool. Your thoughts on FE2 for the weekend?
So FE2, we have a good field. I think we have about 12 or so cars. I've got Jason Conzo to give me a challenge this weekend. He's very fast here, and he runs well. I was able to hold him off last year for both wins, but he seems to be a little bit closer to me this year, especially at Road Atlanta this year. He was, I think he was just a tick faster than me, so he's definitely stepped up, and I expect that he's going to give me a challenge this weekend. So I'm hoping that I can come out victorious, but I'm definitely going to make him work for it if he does get the win.
You were talking about the teammate thing in SPEC Racer Ford. Is there more? Are some tracks? Is that more important in some tracks than others?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's some tracks where a teammate can help you by fighting with other people, right? But it's difficult as a two-car pack to make much progress. This is a track that there's lots of drafting. You're pretty much drafting the entire lap, and so if you and your teammate can stay together and don't make mistakes, you can force the pressure on the other front running guys, and maybe one of them chooses to pass at the wrong time, that gives us a little bit of a gap, and then we can keep our head down, and we can stretch that lead out. So there's definitely tracks where having a teammate will guarantee you a podium finish.
Right.
Some tracks it always helps. Don't get me wrong, especially when you're running up front. But some tracks it's vastly more helpful than others.
So when you do get out front, like you did at Saturday last year,
Yeah.
when do you stop being teammates?
Generally for us, the rule of thumb is the last lap.
Okay.
And when I say we're not teammates, we race like we're not teammates.
Right.
So, it is definitely, it's competitive between us. And I expect 100%, I expect to race somebody on the last lap like they're not my teammate.
Right.
I expect, and I hope that they expect I'm going to do the same thing. I would never roll over even for my best friend.
Right.
If they're going to beat me, they're going to have to beat me. I'm not going to let anybody beat me, by giving it to them. So, generally if it's a competitive race the entire way, sometimes you don't even get the last lap to battle it out. Like last year, we never had a chance to sort it out between ourselves. On the last lap last year, I made a decision going into the bus stop that guaranteed that I was not going to win the race. And so my option is that I could go 3 wide with Bobby and Denny, and who knows what 2 cars comes out in front, or I could choose to push Denny back in front of Bobby and guarantee that a chance that Denny can hold Bobby off the rest of the lap and win the race.
Right.
And that's the choice that I made, only because I was in the position to make that choice. Denny would have 100% made the exact same choice that I did. For me, if I was the one up front, he would have pushed me past Bobby. And so that's what teammates do. Sometimes you have to sacrifice the chance to win the race so that your teammate can win the race. But if it's heads up between me and my teammate, I'm not sacrificing anything. They're going to have to beat me. So,
of course.
Yeah.
Anything specific about Watkins Glen that you like or that you keep an eye out for?
This is a fast track, meaning that you don't really have any slow corners. All the corners lead to straightaways. It's a lot of high speed handling of the car. So it's a quite a bit different track than what we run pretty much anywhere else. And so it does. This is one of the tracks that we change our setup quite a bit for. It's an awesome track. It's smooth. The flow of it, the elevation change. It's a phenomenal track to drive, and I really, really enjoy coming here. My first time here, I did not like the track. I was intimidated by the walls and the fast, just the speed of it. But the second time I came, which was last year, clearly I enjoyed it much more then. When you win, it's always enjoyable. So now I look forward to it. And I was looking forward to it last year too. I wanted another chance at it. I was much more confident in my driving skills and the car. And I knew coming into it last year, I knew I was going to do a lot better than I did the previous time I was here. And so this year I'm feeling confident too. I've had another year of driving under me, and I'm even more confident than I have ever been. But man, Bobby's run really, really strong this year, and so I have a feeling that it's going to be he's going to be the guy to have to deal with. So it might be me and Denny doing our team thing to keep Bobby from getting away from us.
Sure.
And so usually what we do there is when we know somebody's got an advantage on us, basically the strategy then is to just don't let them lead.
Right.
So any chance you get a draft on them, even if it means slowing everybody up, you make a pass on them, keep them in the pack.
Yeah.
And everybody knows the drill. Everybody up front knows exactly what we're going to do. It's not like we have to, to really to be secretive about it. They everybody does the same techniques,
Sure.
and so they know that if you got somebody who has a bit of an advantage at a track, the key is just don't let them get away.
Yeah.
And so keep passing them, keep pulling them back in. And then if they do get out there a little ways, you stop fighting with the people around you, and you close that gap back up, and then you repeat it. So hopefully, we'll have something for Bobby, and we can do a repeat of what we did last year.
Yeah, Bobby looked awful strong at Mid Ohio.
Boy, did man, he looked really strong. And he was strong at Road Atlanta also.
Yeah.
So he's having a good year. And so yeah, he's scary to watch.
When the cars are that equal, and someone looks that strong, that's got to get you sit up on the edge of your seat and go, what's going on? And not that there's any cheating going on, but just how do I get caught up with that, right?
So Mid Ohio is a bit of an outlier because it's new pavement,
right?
And so I think the type of setup that Bobby runs on his car, he probably landed right square in the middle of the window for the optimum setup, because he was fast right out the gate,
right?
And so I think the way he generally runs his car is probably an optimum setup for a new smooth track like Mid Ohio would have been with the new asphalt. I haven't been there, so I'm just speculating, but so I suspect everybody else probably went with the normal setup that they might normally run there, and the asphalt has changed the track so much that setup's probably no good anymore. And they probably spent the weekend. It was they didn't have nobody had a lot of track time,
right?
So if you weren't close in your setup right off the bat, then it may have taken you the entire weekend to figure out what the car needed,
right?
So it doesn't. I didn't see anything that bothered me. I looked at it like the first thing that came to my mind was he's clearly got his car set up for this track, and he nailed the setup. And so without being there myself, I can't speculate, but it looked, man, he really really laid it on him, and I'm proud of him, man. That's because I would do the same thing given the chance. I'd love to have a chance to drive away like that.
Well, and Friday was wet, so nothing that anybody learned on Friday was helpful on Saturday or Sunday. So
Yeah, that's why when I thought about it, I was like, man, he must have come with the right setup right off the bat, and so his car was perfect to begin with,
right?
And so he wasn't chasing a car setup that everybody else may have been chasing.
Sure.
So
sure.
And plus you had a lot of people had never been there,
right?
Tyler and
Morgan.
Liam and Morgan, they hadn't been there. And so, that's a technical track, and it probably takes some laps to get every bit of it out of it. And Bobby he is so good there. And so even had they nailed the setup, it's very likely Bobby would have probably won the races anyway, mainly because he has the experience there.
Do you sim race at all?
No, I don't. I mean, I've done some iRacing, practicing for tracks, but no, I haven't done any sim racing.
Yeah, I was talking with someone that weekend, and there was bumps on the iRacing that aren't there anymore. So there's a lot you couldn't even learn from doing a ton of laps coming in on the sim either. So they're gonna have to go back and rescan that track to find out where the bumps are gone. So there was a lot of disadvantages going in for those folks who had never been there, and even those who had been there. The track is probably so much different with those bumps being gone and all of that, probably a lot of what you knew might not have been applicable for this new surface. So one person we forgot to talk about.
I've never been to Mid Ohio, so I'm looking forward to going next year. So
yeah, it's a great track to drive on. I've had the opportunity to do it, and it is a ton of fun. So I've not been on the new surface, but the old surface was pretty fun. But one person we didn't talk about, we talked about the youngsters. Jace Petty is another one. That's one of those up and comers
totally,
as well.
Yep, totally forgot about Chase.
Yeah.
And so he's not going to be here this week because
he's
too
be
young. 18 to drive.
Right.
To drive here, and so that would give Bobby a very very competitive teammate. So I'm not sure. I didn't see Sandy on the entry list, so I don't think he's going to be here this weekend.
Right.
But he does have um, Justin Claudery, who is very, very good. And I have a feeling he's going to be right in the mix with us this weekend too. So, they run out of the same tent. So I think Bobby's going to be just fine with Justin.
Yeah.
So, I think me and Denny are going to have our hands full again.
Before we let you go, I know we're talking about Watkins Glen, but next stop is the sprints, and then, of course, the runoffs at Road America this year. I'm guessing you're planning to go to the sprints and use that as a warm-up for the runoffs?
I'm not actually.
Oh.
I looked at it. Yeah, the entry list is deep,
Yeah.
and I don't feel that the track time is going to the quality time that I would want probably not going to be worth it. So I'm going to skip the sprints, and then I may just do the cat majors in its place, thinking that I'll probably get the same amount of track time doing that as I would to doing the sprints.
Right.
I've learned the Super Tour races at the same track that the runoffs are at. And VIR was notorious for it.
Right.
The weekends are not very they're not very fun. It's a lot of cleanup work. Everybody's out there trying to get everything they can out of the car, and so I'm gonna take my chances. I'm gonna skip it this year, and we'll see. But I will definitely be there for the runoffs.
Right.
And I did get some time, a few weeks ago at one of the WRL races. So I've definitely seen the surface. I've driven on it for about 6 hours. So I've got a few laps on it.
Sure. Sure. Yeah, and I would guess the cat will probably have more than they normally do because it's before the
It will
runoffs.
be,
But
yeah.
it won't be anything like the sprints. I'm guessing there won't be 80 cars there for the cat.
At least I'm hoping I'm hoping we have a normal size field, 30, 40, 50 cars,
Right.
And so we'll at least get, some good clean sessions in. Road America is not a track that requires, I don't think it requires a lot of laps like some of the other tracks do. I think it's more of just adjusting to the surface. I know the track well, I've been there a lot. So I think it's just more of adjusting to the surface than it is anything. So I don't feel like I need to go pound it like some of the other tracks. I've got so many laps at VIR that I've actually kind of VIR'd out myself.
Sure.
And so I'm not looking to do the same thing at Road America. I don't want to burn myself out on the track like I did at VIR.
Right. Right. Well, Road America is not a highly technical track. There's
No, it's not.
there's space between each turn where you can get your mind up ready for the next one. It flows real nicely together, so there's not a whole lot of if you don't hit this perfectly, you're going to completely screw up your next corner. So I think that's really an astute observation there as far as having to need a ton of laps. Now, if you've never been there before, you certainly want to get there and get some laps in. But if you've got some time on that track, you could pick things up pretty quickly when you go back. So.
Yeah, and it is the track does have some setup work to it,
Right.
that a lot of people kind of dismiss. I mean, there's definitely speed to be found in getting the car set up for the track. And so that does take laps sometimes.
Right.
So but if you're just out there, if you're not making any adjustments to your car and you're just out there making laps to try to eke everything you can out of it, that's what I did at VIR. I'm not looking to do the same thing at Road America. But I plan on spending some time getting the car set up right and, getting adjusted to the new surface.
Right.
So.
Yeah, a lot of people discount because it's so long. It's 4 miles. They kind of forget about and turn 5 is everyone knows turn 5 and going through the carousel and the kink. But I think people discount the fact that if you set up your car to run well from Canada Corner to turn 14, that's kind of the most technical part of the whole track, and onto that long straightaway up the hill. That's kind of the place to go if you're going to work setup, right?
Yeah, definitely. The carousel is one of the spots that there's setup work to be had. It also, all the corners lead to long straightaways.
Right.
So getting your car set up to not necessarily worry so much about mid corner speed, but more worried about getting the car come off the corner well.
Right.
So if you can get to the throttle a little bit earlier, and it translates to much more time later down the straightaway. Yeah, those are the things that you kind of work on there. And so you're not looking for maximum mid corner speed. You're looking for, how can I get the car rotated? How can I get to the throttle earlier, and spend more time accelerating? And that's what you're chasing there for setup.
Yeah.
But the carousel is a big one. There's some time to be made there if each car right. And so, but you have to be careful not to mess the car up for everywhere else.
Right.
So there's
Right.
definitely a fine line there.
I think a lot of people think about Spec Racer and FE2 is there not a whole lot of setup to be done there. How much can you vary the setup on those two cars?
Well, you can vary it a lot.
Okay.
We don't. So from our worst end of the spectrum to the other, and the amount of setup change that we do on the Spec Racers, it's a pretty small window.
Right.
You might go 3-4 sweeps on the shocks. You might go a half inch on the bars. Kind of the window that we work in. And then adjusting the rod height and rake and things like that. So the windows is pretty small, meaning that if you're within the window, the car is going to be 99.9% as fast as it can be. But to be up front, most people up front can drive any car in the field up front.
Right.
Some of them, it'll be a little bit easier than others when you get the setup right. So most of the time we're driving, the setup changes are driving, just getting the car, like trying to be more comfortable in the car.
Right.
We can make the car go fast. Sometimes it's a razor's edge that we don't like. And so we spend some time working on the setup to try to ease up the skill level required to drive it.
Right.
But the FE2, I do move the setup a lot on the FE2. With the wings on the FE2, you've got a lot more work that you can do. And so I run some pretty not wild, but pretty wide differences in setup from some tracks to others. And then this weekend I'm actually trying a new setup, completely different than what I ran last year here. And so last year I ran here with a low downforce setup. So this year I'm running a high downforce setup. And so we're going to see if how much of a difference it made. So I ran VIR both ways. Last year I ran with a low downforce setup, and the previous year I ran with a high downforce setup. So we'll see. I'm anxious to see how this track responds to that. I think it's going to be similar, where the car will be just as fast either way. The high downforce setup does make it more difficult to pass. But if you can get away, the car is easier to drive fast. And so if I can get a little bit of a gap, I think I can utilize that to further get away easier than I could with the low downforce setup.
Yeah. Chuck Matudis in the chat writes, very wise. I'm sure he's talking about you and not me, so we'll go with that. All right. Hey, Russ, so we're running out of time. Any sponsors, anybody you want to thank for helping you along the way?
Well, you got to thank my family. They're my main sponsor, so they're sponsoring me with time to allow me to come on and do things like this, come to these races, have fun. This is the last week of school for my kids, so they'll be out for the summer after this, and looking forward to spending some time with them this summer. And I don't race a lot during the summer. I try to do all my racing in the fall and the spring when they're in school. It's a lot easier. And so but I definitely have to thank them for being patient with me and letting me come on here and do these things. And I have to thank the SCCA for giving us the opportunity to do this stuff.
Very good. Very good. Thank you, sir. Enjoy it. I look forward to tuning in. I'm up at Buttonwillow this weekend doing the Cal Club races, so it'll be Greg Ginsburg and Larry Lefty McLeod on the call for the Super Tour, and you can find all of those broadcasts where you normally find the Super Tour broadcasts. But I will certainly be tuning in. If not on Saturday night, watching it from the track, I'll check them out on Monday, and it's always fun to watch those races. So Thanks so much for joining us.
Hopefully I'm in the race this weekend and not just in the chat. So
there you go. All right.
Thank you.
That's going to do it for another episode of Inside the SCCA. If you like what you're hearing, subscribe to the RacingWire Podcast Network so you won't miss any episodes. Also, subscribe to the Racing Network on YouTube and hit that alarm bell and smash the like button. That's what I'm told the kids tell me to say, that smash the like button. Would also be great if you leave a comment, especially if it's a good one. Follow us on social media so you can find out who our next guest is. On Twitter, it's RacingWireNet. There's a new episode of Inside the SCCA every Wednesday on YouTube and on the podcast channel on Friday mornings. I'm Brian Bielanski. Have yourself a great weekend. Stay safe and go play with cars.
Hi, I'm Kelton Jago, and this is Inside the SCCA.
Inside the SCCA is a presentation of the RacingWire Podcast Network and Rural 15 Productions. This podcast is not affiliated with, endorsed, or sponsored by the Sports Car Club of America. The views expressed within are those of the host and our guests and not that of the SCCA.